to today's broadcast of North Idaho College Public Forum. The crew is comprised of NIC television students, and your moderator is North Idaho College political scientist Tony Stewart.
Subject deals with health and welfare. We particularly would like to discuss some of the issues within that department, the state of Idaho, and as that pertains to the northern part of our state. In order to accomplish that goal, we're very pleased to welcome to the program Michelle Britton, who is the Regional Director for Region 1 of Health and Welfare Department, and I believe I am correct to indicate that that's the 5 northern counties of Idaho.
Right.
Michelle, it's a pleasure to have you with us, and congratulations on your new position. I know you've worked for the department a long time, and we look forward to working with you in this capacity on a number of occasions. And I'm very happy, as always, to welcome regular panelists on our program, Steve Shink, who is the Dean of College Relations and Development at North Idaho College, and we'd invite Steve to commence the questioning.
Thank you, Tony. Welcome, Michelle. As Tony mentioned in his introduction, we're going to get into some specific topics later, but I wonder if we could begin by having you tell us just a little bit about your responsibilities, your new responsibilities as a director, and a little bit about what health and welfare does in this part of the state.
Okay. I've been the regional director officially since January of '90, and I'm responsible for the 5 major programs in health and welfare for the 5 northern counties, Bonner, Boundary, Benewah, Shoshone, and Kootenai County. My major responsibilities have to do with integration of all of our services across all the programs. I'm also kind of the final budget authority in the region. I'm like the central office representative to the region to ensure that policies and procedures are met. I'm also kind of the primary troubleshooter of problems in the region. Also have a lot of responsibility in what our community relationships are like as a department.
You mentioned 5 areas of responsibility that the Department of Health and Welfare covers. Could you tell us a little bit more about those?
Okay. Our 5 major programs are medical and financial assistance, and in that program we authorize and make benefit payments under the food stamp program, the Medicaid program, AFDC, Aid to Dependent Women and Children, and also our senior citizens under Medicaid. Another program is our Family and Children's Services, and in that program we're responsible for child protection, children's mental health services, youth rehabilitation services, and also adoptions and then licensing of foster care. Then we have our mental health program, mental health and adult services program, and we provide mental health services to adults in that program, and we also are involved in adult protection, case management of personal care services. We have the adult child development centers, which are responsible for providing therapeutic services to kids from birth to 5, and then developmentally disabled adults 21 and over. We also have a regional Medicaid unit, and they have the primary payment authorization and monitoring responsibility for all Medicaid services in the region. We also monitor substance abuse contracts to providers in the area, in the 5 northern counties.
And where in that 5 northern county area do you have your offices located?
Okay, the regional office is in Coeur d'Alene.
Are there any offices in the smaller communities in the north?
Yes, we have satellite offices in every county in the 5 northern counties. So, and we provide the full, almost all of the program coverage in each county office.
I see.
Or we'd have traveling staff who go to those offices to provide services.
Steve's question was so excellent because it just sparks many, many questions in the different services that you give. And I'm going to start with one that initiated this program so that we will not run out of time. One thing we've heard in the past around the United States is that individuals who have had all kinds of hardships in life and they are receiving financial assistance from the government through your programs and certain welfare programs, that oftentimes as they have such a desire to train themselves and prepare for employment, they cannot afford to do so because that early stage is less money than they would still in the program. I think you have news for us that there's a new program in
Yes.
place. Could you explain that to our
Okay.
viewers?
The Family Support Act was passed by Congress approximately 2 years ago, and the implementation date, the beginning implementation date for Idaho is October of this year. Our final date that we need to be in compliance with is October of '92, where we must have a jobs program across 95% of the state of Idaho. What the jobs program does, we've had variations of the jobs program in the past, but they have not been real successful. And this is kind of, I think, the federal government's last, maybe not their last big attempt, but it's one very important attempt by the federal government to employ people who are in real difficult circumstances and get them employed and maintain their employment. There are several differences in this program and several that the Department of Health and Welfare that have taken on that are different than some other states. First of all, in this particular program, the federal government is providing money to assist families in payment of child care while they work or are trained, and that's something new. We have not paid for child care historically for families who are beginning to work. The other thing that we will be offering is after an individual has been placed in employment, the state of Idaho, in conjunction with federal dollars, will be paying for child care for 1 year after that employment, and then also will provide Medicaid to that family for up to 6 months after they've been employed. You know, Medicaid for families not to have insurance is very expensive for them, and Medicaid is an additional incentive to try to keep people employed. What we will do is, what will be different about Idaho's program is in the past we bring a mom in and we assess her job skills and we send her out and say, well, try this, do this to become employed. What we've decided as an agency is we're going to assess the entire family. Kids, who in this family's community is a support to them, so that we can bring to bear all the supports in the community for this family to attempt to help them stay employed and to get trained. Being a single parent, which many of the families will be under this program, is very difficult to do. We will also provide dollars that will assist in payment for gas, for transportation, for special equipment that might be needed in order to do their job. And I think we're offering generally more support to get people employed so that we give them enough help so that they can go do it and then become, over time, independent in that process.
In addition to child care payments and the Medicaid and so forth, the single parent, for example, if they go out and get a job, but the pay is maybe minimum wage, they also continue their monthly welfare payments.
Correct. Correct.
Okay. Then what kind of mechanism do you have in place that when you feel they've reached a point of financial security that they no longer, that they can be removed from the welfare payments, so the monthly payments?
Okay. It'll be dependent upon what their wages are, and that is individually determined on every case. You know, full-time employment is the goal, and that's an individual eligibility question for every client.
But this makes that transition very possible and much more likely to succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a real important piece of federal legislation, because the feds feel like we have done as much as we can do to make this work, and if it doesn't work, then maybe it can't work. Maybe there isn't an approach out there that can do it. So the feds are going to be watching this very closely, and in fact have a lot of requirements for states to develop database systems to follow everything that we do. How much has it cost? What are the benefits? How long have people been employed? A whole lot of database that they'll be collecting.
But it appears here that Idaho's very serious attempt to do this has better chance of succeeding because the state is putting in some additional, what you've been indicating, provisions to make it more likely that the family won't find that during this process that there are certain financial burdens.
Correct. I think with our approach, where we look at the whole family unit and not just the individual who needs to be employed, we're going to be much more successful in bringing in the support systems that help people to work. We'll assess their values about work and the work ethic and all those kinds of things. We'll just have better information about what it is, not just job skill-wise, but belief-wise, family support-wise, that will make them able to work.
Steve Shink.
Michelle, you talked about the federal government watching this program carefully to see if it's going to work. Do you know yet how they'll decide?
I honestly don't know. They will, as I said, they have a lot of database requirements, and I don't know how they'll make the decisions. What is the criteria for it works? I don't know.
Is your department going to try to set some standards and some goals? We'd like to see a certain percentage of people through the program and off of welfare, Medicaid, child care payments after so many months association with it, or have you thought about those sorts of things?
We've thought about them, but at this point I think it's too early to really know what we need to be setting as criteria or standards. The problem that we'll have with jobs is the gatekeeping. How many people can we get in the door, and how fast can we get them in the door with the number of bodies that we will have to serve them in a family-based model.
Have you got any estimates of the number of people in your district who are going to be eligible for the program?
Approximately in Kootenai County, 300. It's a lot. That's not anywhere else. Right now, the jobs program is only located in Kootenai County. In successive years, it will probably be expanded to other counties, but this first year, we're looking at 300.
Much of the new services that you're talking about providing make a lot of sense to me from what little I know about the Department of Health and Welfare, the Medicaid payments, the child care payments, welfare payments. The part about assessing job skills, though, do you work in conjunction with other agencies to provide that service?
Absolutely. I think what federal legislation is tending to do all the time, and what the department sees as good practice, is we do everything interagency. We're not this isolated body that does everything. And so we will be working with Adult Basic Ed, Vocational Education, the Department of Employment, the PICS. It's very broad-based, and we will have contracts with different providers to assist us in providing the services.
So after you assess someone's skill levels, the Adult Basic Education program at North Idaho College, for instance,
Correct.
if I get in a little plug to it,
Correct.
might step in and help bring someone up to a level of employability so that they have a better chance of succeeding in this
Correct.
program. That's excellent.
Correct.
Something you've been mentioning through this whole process with Steve's questions and mine has to do with insurance for medical purposes or medical care. I wish you'd share with our viewers some of your experience or some statistics. I hear frightening statistics about the number of Americans that have absolutely no health insurance at all. And one sickness, and even individuals who have a small nest egg now could be wiped out. To what extent in your department do you find this to be such a serious problem?
It is a very serious problem. I don't know the statistics off the top of my head very well, but even for families to meet deductibles when they have insurance can be a major setback for them in attempting to get health care. I've heard some numbers under the new law by the feds, OBRA 89. It will cover all children eventually from birth to 21 who meet certain income levels. And right now the state has set the poverty level at 133% of the poverty level. And I've heard numbers as high as 60% of Idaho children will be on Medicaid by the time OBRA 89 is through its full succession of years that we have to bring new people into the system.
And particularly when hospitalization is involved, you can within 2 or 3 weeks have bills of $20,000, $30,000.
Correct. Yep.
There's another area that you deal with that I'm very interested in discussing, and that is the field of mental health.
Mm-hmm.
To what extent is that a problem in your service area? You hear comments, but I just haven't seen the statistics. In Idaho or in the Northwest area, do we have regions or pockets where there is more need or demand for mental health services than in others?
Okay, because mental health can be such a large service that we could provide, we've really limited our scope of service to the chronically mentally ill. And we have a number of them, a very large population in Region 1. In some ways, the more urban areas like Boise and Pocatello are hit harder than we are because they just have much bigger numbers to deal with by virtue of their population. But we probably, within a given month, have 500 open cases in the region for chronic mental ill services.
I mean, that is the very serious, most serious.
The most serious population.
But if you served all the mental health needs, what kind of numbers are you talking about?
You know, I really couldn't tell you that. It would be substantially above that. I would estimate at least double if we didn't just limit to the chronically mentally ill population.
We hear theories from time to time that mental problems are tied to certain aspects of the environment. Even there's theories that if you're in a cold climate, that where people get cabin fever, they're in more and so forth, that there may be some stress that is not in others. Do you have any kind of information you can share with our viewers that, particularly, first of all, how our region stacks up with others, and are there certain factors that we need to look at that might assist us in addressing the problem?
One of our busy times, when we start into the winter time, it gets busier for us. Part of it, I think, is what you called cabin fever and people being more contained. The weather prevents people from getting out and traveling or whatever. The stresses of the holidays is always a big one for us, as far as, you know, people who become suicidal or having episodes, you know, at that point in time. I don't think our region is much different than other regions in terms of the chronically mentally ill population. That's such a distinct category, you know, that even though there's a wide variation in the type of individual problems or whatever, environmental factors influence them, but there are a whole lot of other factors that also influence that, you know, aren't specific to a region.
Yes. Steve Sheen.
Michelle, a couple of times in a pretty brief conversation here, you've had to mention what your department does to limit the number of people who you can serve. Is that a serious problem for you in all the areas of service you provide?
Absolutely. You know, we have legal mandates that tell us what we can and can't do. But then we also have some level of service that we can provide that are voluntary, where we can provide it if our budget allows. And the problem is there's a whole big pool out there of voluntary work that we could be doing that we just cannot do because the resources aren't there. I can give you a good example. For example, in our Family and Children's Services, we serve children's mental health, juvenile justice cases, child protection cases, very, very serious types of issues in that one program. And in Kootenai County right now, we have approximately 70 kids committed to us through the court system for juvenile services. We have another approximately 30 child protection cases, and we also have another 30 mental health cases. We have to see the kids that are committed to us either under the Child Protection Act or the Children's Mental Health Act or the Juvenile Justice Act. Well, that doesn't leave us a whole lot of room after you've already got 130 kids in the door to see anybody else. And we have a real problem in closing the door and saying we can't serve you. We know that we're the only agency that can provide it at a low cost or no cost, but we have to close the door because we have all these other mandated services we have to provide.
As the gatekeeper, and I think that's the term you use to those services, are the yardsticks that you usually apply either the legal mandates or the seriousness of the cases you have to deal with?
Those are the two primary ones, are our legal requirements and then the seriousness, and also we look at can they get it anywhere else. You know, if you're a family with substantial income and you have a children's mental health case, it can go to the private sector. We would not elect to take that case because we can provide our service at no cost or reduced cost to families who have financial needs.
If I can move into a little different area, Tony, I know that in Idaho for some time a topic of conversation in the legislature has been licensing of child care centers and strengthened laws against various forms of child abuse. In your view, through the services you provide, are we in better shape in Idaho than we were 5 years ago?
Absolutely, we are definitely in better shape, and I think in Coeur d'Alene we're in better shape because we have a child care ordinance, you know, in addition, and so that's been real helpful. One of the impacts of the JOBS program is going to be a much expanded need for child care providers, and they're not out there. So one of the things that we will be funded to do is to recruit more child care providers. Another issue around child care is not just the number of providers, but also when are they available? Jobs aren't always between 8 and 5. They're between 5 and 6 a.m. in the morning. And so that's going to present another issue for us in terms of child care.
With Steve's question on child services and child care, we have seen statistically a frightening increase in child abuse cases around the United States and Idaho too. We've become cognizant of that and we have worked on legislation. Is there an increasing number of children who are abused, or are we getting so much better at reporting those and addressing them? Or is it a combination?
It's a combination. It's both of those. And I think you will also see that as we increase in substance abuse, there's going to be an increase in child abuse as a result, or sexual abuse or negligence. And so the increase in substance abuse, I think, is a factor in an increase in those, not just our awareness about that and better reporting.
In addition to the substance abuse and those involved with that, directing that at the children, share with us some of the other conditions that lead to child abuse.
Okay. I think another important one is financial stress. Also, if you, as an adult person, have a history of being an abused child, then you are also more likely to do it yourself. Another one is an increased number of single-parent households. A lot of our juvenile justice cases are out of single-parent households. And I think what we've done as a culture is, in our evolution of families, we've gone to single-parent households, but we haven't developed what the alternative is. So with all these single parents, we haven't developed the support systems for them to make it as a family. And it's really interesting to see the number of male children in single households headed by moms who are in the court systems. It's a very difficult hardship, I think, for a single-parent household.
You used the number a moment ago that you have about 130 children from 3 different programs that are directed to you.
That's Kootenai County.
In Kootenai County alone, not counting the other 4 counties. What are some of the organizations or groups that you work with? I assume in a number of those that you have custody of those children.
Correct.
And are some of them in foster homes, and are some of them in some institutions? What kind of facilities do you have for them? Okay.
Locally, we have some residential placement for example, juveniles at the Anchor House here, and you may be aware of that. We do have foster home placements that we use. In our region and the state of Idaho, we have what's called moved into a family-centered model, and our effort is to not use those resources. Those are resources of last resort, and the goal is to attempt to have families maintain their abilities to care for children who are either in the court system or who have been abused. And our first job is protection of the child and protection of the community first. But our second job is to attempt for the families to be responsible and for the state not to be responsible. And in fact, we have some recognition from the National Institute of Mental Health, because we've recently acquired a grant from them to provide children's mental health services in a way where we attempt to avoid institutional placement of those kids.
Another issue that you've mentioned that involves children is adoptions. What is the status now? Are there a number of children that are available for adoption, or is there a greater demand for adoption of children than there are children?
Yes, there's a greater demand than there are children, and obviously placing the newborn infants a real different matter. The kids that are our biggest difficulty are the kids who are beyond infancy, who are hard to place, who have a history of child abuse. I don't think people have any awareness. If you have a family with 3 siblings in it, then you've got to look at maybe more than one family to place those kids for adoption. And it takes an incredible number of resources in terms of therapy time and respite time for the adoptive family to deal with these kids, because a lot of them are behaviorally disordered because of their history and abuse. So it's a very demanding area of our program.
So I hear you saying 2 things. There's a much greater demand for infants.
And there aren't a lot.
But there aren't a lot of demands for those who are 8 or 10 or 12.
Correct. We're kind of at opposite ends. There's a lot of demand for the infants, and there aren't a lot of them. There's no demand, or very little demand, for the hard to place, and that's where we've got more kids.
Steve Shink.
Michelle, a couple of times now you've talked about priorities, I suppose is one way to put it, of your department. You try not to provide services for people who can pay for those services themselves. You try to help families help themselves as opposed to inserting the department into family matters. We're frequently critical here in Idaho of too much government and of government intrusion in our private lives. Do most of the people that you deal with have any other place to go for the sorts of services you provide?
Most of them do not, and we have a mandate to provide it. And so...
if you have to turn them away,
a lot of
they're out in
times,
the cold.
a lot of times that's true, because you know, we have attempted to have more private contractors so that we can bring the private sector in to help provide services. And we pay for that, but there's a limit on that. And if people can't pay for the service, we tend to be the only one. There are some church organizations that have social service agencies within them that are helpful, but they don't cover the broad range of services that we cover as an agency.
I'm curious, and this is somewhat related to my first question. In those cases where you've used outside providers for services, is it your experience that that is less expensive to deliver than providing it through your own department?
Well, I guess the way I see it is contractors can be more efficient because we pay them for a very specific thing and that's all they do, and we pay them for only that. But our service delivery requirements are so broad that we need the continuity of employees who can be on call at 3:30 in the morning, who can go out and do an investigation at any time, and not be bound by a schedule in their private practice. So, you know, in the department, I think in recent years has found that the best combination is public agency, public employees in conjunction with private sector, private contracts.
I've also heard you say today, I think, that from the things that you could do that you don't have the funds, does that also mean that your staff is limited, that if you had more staff you could cover some areas you're not now covering?
Yes.
What is your staff approximately now?
I think given the new legislation and new appropriations from last year, we're probably in the region up to about 230 approximately for the 5 northern counties. And by and large, I think this is an interesting statistic for the region, we are the second smallest region in the state out of 7 regions in terms of general population. But because we're the 3rd largest region in financial assistance needs, we have the 3rd biggest employee population in the state.
So that creates that situation. I wish we could continue.
Okay.
You've been so informative, and we'll have to have you back at some future date. And I know Steve joins me in thanking you for being with us today.
Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you've enjoyed our program and that we've had some serious topics to talk about, and I know that problem is common in other states and other regions as it is here. And we hope you'll be with us again next week when we will discuss what is an important subject. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
North Idaho College Public Forum can be seen at the same time each week over this station. This production was videotaped earlier by an NIC student crew for viewing at this more appropriate time.